My son picked the cheapest nursing home in the county for me. Roaches in the water pitcher. A shared bathroom that didn't lock. 41 days of that, while he told everyone I insisted on it. He didn't know I could hear every word he said on the phone in the hallway outside my room. He didn't know I was already calling my lawyer. And he definitely didn't know his boss was about to call him in the middle of dinner. Or so he thought. My name is Walter Doyle. I'm 67 years old. I built a mechanical contracting company out of a two-bay garage in Asheville, North Carolina, and I spent 40 years of my life believing that if you worked hard and loved your family without keeping score, they would take care of you when it mattered. I was wrong about the second part. Not about all of them, but about enough of them that it nearly cost me everything, including my life. This is the story of the worst 41 days of my life, and the one dinner where I finally got to say what I'd been holding in my chest since the day I woke up in that place. Let me back up. I started Doyle Mechanical in 1987 out of a rented garage on Haywood Road with $1,100, a used step van, and a set of pipe wrenches I still have hanging in my workshop today. HVAC, commercial plumbing, industrial refrigeration for the restaurants and breweries that turned Asheville into the kind of town people moved to instead of leave. By 2010, we had 31 employees and contracts with half the hospitals and hotels in Buncombe County. My wife, Diane, 64, kept the books for the first 9 years and still knows more about that company's cash flow than most CPAs. We raised 2 kids in a 4-bedroom house off Marymount Avenue. The kind of house with a wraparound porch and a maple tree out front that turns the whole yard orange every October. My son, Derek, is 33. He works as a commercial accounts manager at Meridian Insurance Group downtown, the kind of job with a parking garage badge and a corner cubicle he likes to photograph for LinkedIn. My daughter, Lauren, is 29. She's a physical therapist at Mission Hospital, works 12-hour shifts 3 days a week, and drives a 2014 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it that she refuses to let me help her replace. I want you to hold on to those 2 descriptions, because everything that happened over those 41 days sits right inside the gap between them. It was a Thursday morning in March, a little past 8, and I was in the shop office going over a bid for a walk-in freezer install when the left side of my face went numb. I remember reaching for my coffee mug and watching my hand miss it by 4 inches like it belonged to somebody else. My foreman, Ricky Osborne, 19 years with me, said later I tried to say his name and what came out sounded like gravel poured into a bucket. He called 911 before I hit the floor. I don't remember the ambulance. I remember waking up in a hallway at Mission Hospital with a nurse shining a light in my eyes, asking me to squeeze her hand, and thinking, with total clarity, that I couldn't feel my own fingers to know if I was squeezing anything at all. They told Diane it was an ischemic stroke, moderate severity, right side of the brain affecting my left arm, left leg, and some of my speech. The neurologist, a careful woman named Dr. Patel, said the first 72 hours would tell them a lot, and that with aggressive inpatient rehabilitation, a man my age and my physical condition had a real shot at recovering most of his function within 6 months to a year. Aggressive inpatient rehabilitation. I want you to remember those 3 words, because they matter more than almost anything else in this story. I was in and out for the first 2 days. Not unconscious, not exactly, just underwater, the way a fever holds you down before it breaks. But by day 3, I was surfacing more than I was sinking, and that's when I started hearing things I was never supposed to hear. Here's what nobody tells you about a stroke that hits your speech before it hits your hearing. You can understand every single word. You just can't answer back. I could hear the monitor beeping, the cart wheels squeaking in the hallway, the particular rhythm of my wife's footsteps versus my daughter's versus my son's. And on day 3, a little after noon, I heard Derek's voice right outside my door, low, the way people talk when they think a door counts as a wall. We are not doing $11,000 a month for inpatient rehab, Mom. I looked it up. There's a place called Sunny Acres out past Inca. 6,000 less. It's fine. It's a nursing home. They all do the same basic therapy. Diane's voice, quieter, uncertain. Your father would want the best care, Derek. We can afford. We can't just drain the business accounts because Dad had a bad morning, Derek said, and something in my chest went cold and still at the word we. Insurance covers the medical side. This is about the extended stay, and Sunny Acres takes Medicare supplemental. It's the smart choice. It's what he'd tell us to do if he could talk right now. You know how he is about money. He'd never forgive us for wasting it. I lay there with a feeding tube taped to my cheek and listened to my son describe me, accurately, as a careful man with money, and use that description like a weapon against me while I couldn't say a single word in my own defense. I want to be clear, because people ask me this a lot now. I was never a poor man pretending to be comfortable. Doyle Mechanical did $9.2 million in revenue the year of my stroke. I also had a self-directed account with an advisor named Kurt Hallbrook that neither Diane nor Derek had full visibility into, because 20 years ago, after watching a business partner get bled dry by a divorce, I decided to keep one account that was mine alone, funded slowly out of my own draw, never touched, never discussed. It sat, that Thursday morning, at just over $1.1 million. Derek didn't know it existed. Diane knew of it only the way you know your husband has a safety deposit box you've never opened. So when my son stood 11 feet from where I lay half paralyzed and argued that Sunny Acres was the smart choice because of what money we could or couldn't afford, he wasn't telling the truth. He just didn't know he wasn't telling the truth because he'd never bothered to ask me directly. Not once. Not even a version of the question mouthed slowly to a man who could blink twice for yes. Lauren was the only one who pushed back. I heard her say it plainly, the flat, exhausted tone of a woman who spends her working life inside hospitals and knows exactly what a bad facility looks like from the inside. I've heard about Sunny Acres, Derek. One of my patients transferred out of there in October with a bedsore the size of a dinner plate. I am telling you, as a licensed PT, that is not where Dad should go. It's 45 days, tops, Derek said. We move him somewhere nicer once he's stabilized. It's not permanent. Nobody asked me. That's the part one keep coming back to. Nobody held up two fingers and said, blink once for Sunny Acres, twice for somewhere else. They just decided, in a hallway, over the sound of a floor buffer 2 rooms down. 3 days later, 2 orderlies loaded me into a transport van and drove me 40 minutes out past Anka Lake to a 1-story brick building with a sign missing its S, so that from the road it read UNNY Acres. I didn't know it yet. Lying in that van with my left arm strapped down so it wouldn't slide off the gurney. But I was about to spend the next 6 weeks of my life learning exactly what my son thought I was worth, and exactly what my daughter was willing to sacrifice to make sure I didn't find out alone. The room at Sunny Acres was semi-private, a polite word for shared, with a curtain that didn't fully close and a roommate named Herschel who talked to a television that wasn't plugged in. The water pitcher on my nightstand grew a film the first week that nobody changed until Lauren showed up, opened it, found something moving inside, and walked straight to the nurse's station without lowering her voice once. The physical therapy I'd been promised, the aggressive 6 days a week program Dr. Patel had recommended, turned out to be 20 minutes 3 times a week with a rotating cast of aides who mostly helped me shuffle 12 feet down a hallway and called it a win. I want to be fair, because there were people at Sunny Acres who tried. A nursing assistant named Priya used to sneak in 15 extra minutes some mornings to work my left hand through a stress ball routine, off the clock, because watching me try to hold a fork with my right hand alone broke her heart a little. I'll never forget her. But one good aide can't undo a facility built to spend as little as legally possible per resident. Here's the thing about being trapped in a body that barely obeys you. You have an enormous amount of time to think, and almost no way to act on any of it. So I thought about the $11,000 figure Derek had quoted like an insult. I thought about the maple tree on Marymount Avenue and who was raking under it that fall. Mostly I thought about the fact that my son worked 40 minutes away, and in the first 2 weeks at Sunny Acres, he visited exactly twice, for maybe 40 minutes combined, while telling his mother on the phone, loud enough for me to hear through the wall, that he was out there practically every day checking on me. I didn't know it yet, but that lie was about to become the least of what Derek was hiding. The speech came back slowly, in pieces, the way ice breaks up on a lake in March. First single words, water, bathroom, then short phrases the second week, thick and slurred, but there. I told the speech therapist, a patient young man named Marcus, that I wanted to keep my progress quiet from my family a while longer. I said I was tired and needed rest before visits. That wasn't the real reason. The real reason was that the moment my family knew I could talk, the version of me they talked around freely in hallways and doorways would be gone. I wasn't ready to give that up. Not until I understood exactly what I was dealing with. Lauren came 3 times a week without fail. She'd finish a 12-hour shift at Mission, still in her scrub top, and drive straight out to Inco with a grocery bag of things Sunny Acres didn't reliably provide. A better pillow, unsweetened applesauce, since the kitchen's only flavor was a red dye concoction that made my mouth hurt. A battery-powered fan for the nights the air conditioning cut out, which happened more than you'd think for a North Carolina summer. She'd sit and talk about her patients, about the Civic making a noise she couldn't afford to fix, about anything and nothing, filling the silence I couldn't yet fill myself. She never once asked me to perform gratitude. She just showed up. Derek's visits, when they happened, followed a pattern I started tracking like a case file in my head, because thinking like a businessman was the only power I had left. He'd arrive, stand near the door instead of sitting, check his phone twice in the first 5 minutes, tell me I was looking stronger in a tone that suggested he hadn't actually looked, and leave within 20 minutes citing a call. On one visit, the second week of April, he stepped just outside my door to take that call, and because the door didn't fully latch, I heard every word. "Yeah, it's under control," Derek said. "I told my supervisor I'm on intermittent FMLA for Dad's care, so I get paid time without burning my PTO. Long as I document a few hours a week, I'm covered. No, I'm not spending those hours out here. I'm using it to finish the boat paperwork. Marcy at the marina says if I close by June, I lock the slip rate for 2 years. Basically got a free Tuesday afternoon every week, now courtesy of my incapacitated father." I lay very still. My incapacitated father. He'd said it like a punchline. I found out later, piece by piece, what intermittent FMLA actually meant in Derek's case. But that day, lying in a bed with a water pitcher I was afraid to drink from, all I understood was this. My son had turned my stroke into a paid excuse to buy a boat, while telling his employer he was here, at my bedside, providing care he was not providing, while his sister drove out here on her actual days off with applesauce and a box fan. I didn't know it yet, but that phone call was the first thread. There were a lot more to pull. The financial piece came into focus on a Sunday in late April, when Diane visited alone and, thinking I still couldn't respond meaningfully, started talking the way people do to fill a silence they've stopped expecting anything back from. She mentioned, almost as an aside, that Derek had taken over paying the Sunny Acres bill directly out of our joint household account, the one we'd shared for 31 years, so I wouldn't have to worry about the paperwork once I was home. She said it like a kindness. I lay there doing math, slow at first, then faster. Sunny Acres billed just under $5,000 a month. Inpatient rehab would have run closer to 11. Derek wasn't just choosing the cheaper option. He was managing the account where the difference now sat, uncounted, unaccountable, $6,000 a month with nobody but him watching it move. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a vindictive man by nature. I built a business on invoices that matched the work performed, on showing up when I said I'd show up. What I felt lying in that bed wasn't rage, not yet. It was the specific, cold clarity of a man who has just realized he's been quietly audited out of his own family's honesty, and needs to find out exactly how deep the discrepancy runs before he does anything about it. The following Tuesday, when Marcus came for my speech session, I asked him, in a full sentence that surprised us both with how clean it came out, whether the facility had a phone I could use privately. He found me one. My hand still shook, but I could dial. I called Elliot Marsh. Elliot had been my business attorney for 22 years, handled every commercial contract Doyle Mechanical ever signed, and more importantly, was a man who didn't gossip, didn't judge, and answered his phone on the second ring no matter what. "Walter," he said, and I could hear him sit up straighter through the phone. "I heard about the stroke. God, it's good to hear your voice. How are you doing? I need you to do something for me," I said, slow, careful, each word costing me effort Elliot couldn't see. "I need you to look into something quietly. My son, FMLA paperwork through Meridian Insurance. And I need you to find out where the money in my joint account with Diane has been going since March the 12th. There was a pause on Elliot's end, the kind of pause a good lawyer gives you when he already suspects the answer is going to be worse than the question. "You want me to hire someone," he said. "Not just look. Actually look." "Yes," I said. "And Elliot, don't tell Diane yet. Don't tell anyone." He didn't ask me why. 22 years of doing business together meant he trusted that if I was asking, I had a reason. He said he'd have something for me within 2 weeks. And he did, though it turned out to be far more, and far worse than either of us expected. If you've been with me this far, you already know how this channel works. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge Stories. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and if you haven't already, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight, because we've still got a long way to go, and trust me, it gets worse before it gets better. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss where this one lands. Elliot called back on a Thursday, 11 days after our first conversation, and asked if I could take a longer call. Priya had helped me into the courtyard that morning, a small concrete square with 2 benches and a magnolia tree that was the only genuinely pleasant thing about Sunny Acres, and that's where I sat with the facility's cordless phone pressed to my ear while Elliot laid it out. "Walter," he said, "I want you to understand this is documented, not speculation. Derek filed for intermittent FMLA leave with Meridian's HR department on March the 14th, 2 days after your stroke, citing the need to provide direct caregiving support. Intermittent FMLA means he doesn't take it all at once. He logs specific hours each week, and Meridian pays those hours as protected leave, meaning he doesn't burn PTO, and his position stays fully secure no matter how many hours he logs. Since March 14th, he has logged an average of 11 hours a week. 11 hours, I repeated. 11 hours a week, Elliot said, for care that, according to the visitor logs Lauren was kind enough to help us obtain from Sunny Acres, adds up to roughly 90 minutes of actual documented visits over the same period. I sat with that under the magnolia tree for a long moment before I asked the question I'd been circling for 2 weeks. And the account? I could hear Elliot flipping papers. Since March 12th, $41,800 has moved out of your joint account with Diane. Some of it's legitimate, Sunny Acres billing, a copay here and there. But $26,000 of it went out as 3 transfers to a business called Blue Ridge Marine Sales. I called them, told them I was handling your estate paperwork. They confirmed it. 26-foot pontoon boat, down payment, and a 2-year mooring at Lake James. Derek's name is on the purchase agreement. Diane's name is on the account he pulled it from. I didn't say anything for a while. A cardinal landed on the courtyard fence and left again. I thought about Derek standing in my hospital doorway saying we can't just drain the business accounts because Dad had a bad morning, like he was the responsible one in the family, like he was protecting something. "There's one more thing," Elliot said, his voice carrying the careful tone of a man about to tell you something that will land harder than the rest. I checked how the FMLA claim was processed, whether there was any oversight. Derek's direct supervisor at Meridian, the man who approved his leave and signs his reviews, is Grant Holloway. The same Grant Holloway who sat across from you at the chamber dinner 2 years ago and asked your advice on expanding his commercial lines book. He remembered you, Walter. When I called Meridian's HR with a general question about their FMLA process, Grant took the call himself, recognized your name on the file, and asked me, word for word, "Is everything all right with Walter Doyle?" I sat under that magnolia tree and felt something shift in my chest that had nothing to do with the stroke. Grant Holloway managed a piece of Doyle Mechanical's commercial insurance portfolio. I'd shaken that man's hand at a fundraiser. And my son had spent 11 weeks logging fraudulent caregiving hours to a supervisor who personally knew the father he claimed to be caring for. I didn't know it yet, but that single detail, Grant Holloway remembering my name, was about to become the hinge the entire rest of this story swung on. I asked Elliot to do 3 things. First, quietly arrange for me to be transferred out of Sunny Acres to Carolina Ridge Rehabilitation, the inpatient facility Dr. Patel had recommended from the very beginning, paid for entirely out of my own separate account, the one nobody but Kurt Hallbrook and I knew existed. Second, to prepare full documentation of everything he'd found, time-stamped, notarized, ready to be handed to whoever needed to see it. Third, and this was the part that took him the longest to agree to say nothing to Diane, Derek, or even Lauren, until I said otherwise. The transfer happened on a Monday in early May, 41 days after I arrived at Sunny Acres. Priya hugged me before I left, and I made sure Elliot arranged a proper thank you for her, because some people deserve to be remembered for the right reasons. Carolina Ridge was a different world. Real physical therapy, 6 days a week, a neurologist checking on me twice weekly, a room with a window that looked out over pines instead of a parking lot. Within 3 weeks, I was walking a hallway with a quad cane. Within 5, a stranger might not have noticed anything had happened to me at all, beyond a slight drag on certain words when I got tired. Diane cried the first time she saw the new room, and I let her believe, for a little while longer, that the transfer had simply been the natural next step in my care, arranged by the medical team, nothing more. It wasn't a lie exactly. It just wasn't the whole truth. I wasn't ready to give her the whole truth yet, because I hadn't decided what to do with it myself. Lauren visited Carolina Ridge the same way she'd visited Sunny Acres, 3 times a week, except now she came in laughing more, relieved in a way that showed in her shoulders. She never once asked how the transfer happened or who was paying for it. But there was a moment, the second week, when she sat on the edge of my bed and said, quiet, almost embarrassed to bring it up, "I looked into the pricing here, Dad. Runs over $300 a day more than Sunny Acres. I don't know how insurance is covering the gap, but if it isn't, I've got some savings. Not much. I don't want you going back there because of money." I looked at my daughter, $31,000 a year into a physical therapy career, driving a Civic held together by faith and duct tape, offering me her savings account without blinking, and I understood something with total clarity that I want to pass on to anyone listening to this. The people who show up quietly, without announcing it, without turning it into leverage later, those are the ones you build a life around. Not the ones who manage your accounts and call it love. Derek visited Carolina Ridge exactly once in those 5 weeks, and he spent most of it on his phone in the hallway, a habit I now understood better than he realized. I heard enough of that call, half by accident, half because old instincts die hard, to know he was talking to someone at the marina about scheduling a haul-out inspection. I said nothing. I was, by then, already building something bigger than a single confrontation in a hospital hallway. I wanted the whole picture assembled before I lit the match. By the first week of June, I was discharged from Carolina Ridge with a cane I mostly used out of habit, full speech, and a manila folder in my study that could end my son's employment the moment I decided to open it in the right room. Diane wanted a small dinner to celebrate my homecoming, family only, under the maple tree that had gone from bare to full green while I was gone. I told her that sounded perfect. I asked if I could help plan the guest list. She said of course, thrilled I was engaged enough in life again to care about something as small as a dinner party. There was one addition to her list. I asked her to invite Grant Holloway and his wife, framing it as a thank you for the flexibility Meridian had shown Derek during my recovery. Diane thought it was a lovely gesture. Derek smiled and said it was a great idea, said it would look good for him too. My son thought I was doing him a favor. He had no idea I was setting a table. I didn't know exactly how the evening would unfold when I picked up that phone in Elliot's office 3 days before the dinner and asked him one final favor. But I knew this much. 41 days in a facility with a broken sign and a filthy water pitcher had taught me exactly how much patience I had left, and I intended to spend every bit of it correctly. The dinner was set for a Saturday evening in mid-June, the kind of Asheville evening where the heat finally lets go around 7. Diane brought in a spread, not fancy, roasted chicken and cornbread and a peach cobbler she made herself because some things she'll never trust to anyone else. She strung small white lights along the porch railing and bought a cream-colored banner that read "Welcome Home, Dad," and I stood in the kitchen that morning and looked at those words longer than I probably should have. Lauren arrived first, in real clothes instead of scrubs for once, carrying a bottle of wine and a card she made me open right there on the porch. Inside, in her handwriting, she'd written that she was proud of how hard I'd fought to come back, and that she loved me, plain and simple, no qualifiers. I folded that card and put it in my breast pocket, and it stayed there the rest of the night. Derek arrived next, in a golf shirt, tan in a way that told me exactly where his FMLA hours had gone. He shook my hand with both of his, the way people do when they want a handshake to look warmer than it is, and said, "Looking strong, Dad. Really glad to see you back on your feet." I told him I felt better than I had in years, which was, for the first time all evening, the complete truth. Grant Holloway and his wife, Cheryl, arrived at 7, and Grant greeted me like a man genuinely glad to see an old acquaintance upright and talking. "Walter," he said, gripping my hand, "when your lawyer called our office asking about our FMLA procedures, purely routine," he said, my ears perked right up. "Derek's been a real help managing your commercial account this spring, on top of everything going on at home. Man's been putting in the hours." Derek, standing a few feet away with a beer in his hand, laughed, a little too loud, and said something about family always coming first. I watched him say it. I watched Grant nod, believing every word. By 8 o'clock, the backyard was full of the easy noise of a family dinner, the kind of sound Sunny Acres never once had. Diane moved through the crowd looking, for the first time in months, like a woman who could finally exhale. I let the evening breathe. I ate the chicken. I let Grant tell me about his daughter starting at App State in the fall. I waited. At 8:40, I stood, picked up a fork, and tapped it once against my glass. The yard went quiet the way yards do when the host of the evening finally speaks. Diane looked over, smiling, expecting a toast about recovery and gratitude, and for the first 90 seconds, that's exactly what she got. 41 days ago, I said, my voice steady, only the faintest drag on the harder consonants. I was lying in a bed, unable to move my left hand or say my own name clearly. Tonight, I'm standing in my backyard under a tree I planted the year Derek was born. I've thought a lot these past few months about what it means to take care of the people you love and what it costs when someone only pretends to. I watched Derek smile hold for one more second before something behind his eyes started to shift. Diane's did too, the particular alertness of a wife who spent 31 years learning to read the exact temperature of her husband's voice. I want to thank everyone who actually showed up for me this spring, I continued. Lauren, who drove out to Inca 3 times a week on her only days off with applesauce and a box fan because the air conditioning kept failing at the facility I was placed in. I looked at my daughter, who had gone very still, sensing something was coming she hadn't been warned about. You never once asked what it was costing you. That's not something I'm going to forget. I turned, slow, toward my son. And I want to thank Derek, I said, for choosing Sunny Acres out past Inca Lake instead of the inpatient rehabilitation facility my own neurologist recommended, because it was $6,000 a month cheaper, and for managing the difference through our joint account so carefully that Blue Ridge Marine Sales received $26,000 of it as a down payment on a pontoon boat currently moored at Lake James. The yard did not make a sound. Diane's hand came up to her mouth. Grant Holloway's easy, social smile had gone completely flat. Dad, Derek started, his voice already climbing. I'm not finished, I said, and something in my tone made him stop. I also want to thank you for filing intermittent FMLA paperwork with Meridian 2 days after my stroke, citing direct caregiving responsibilities, and logging an average of 11 hours a week for 11 straight weeks, while the visitor logs at the facility you chose for me show a combined total of 90 minutes of actual visits over that same period. I looked at Grant Holloway directly. I know this must be uncomfortable to hear at a dinner party, I said, and I mean that sincerely. But you asked my lawyer a very good question a few weeks ago. You asked if everything was all right with Walter Doyle. I think you deserve an honest answer, and I think, as his supervisor, you deserve to know exactly what those FMLA hours were actually spent on, since Meridian paid your company's money for care that was not being provided. Grant Holloway set his drink down on the porch rail very carefully, the way a man sets something down when his hands have started to feel unreliable. He looked at Derek for a long moment, and I watched 20 years of professional instinct settle behind his eyes. Derek's face had gone through several colors by then, but the one it landed on was a kind of gray I hadn't seen on him since he was 19, and I caught him in a lie about a car accident that turned out to be a parking lot fender bender he'd tried to hide from his insurance. Dad, he said again, quieter this time, this isn't the... I set the manila folder Elliot had prepared on the table beside the peach cobbler. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Everything in it is documented, dated, and notarized, I said. Bank transfers. The boat purchase agreement with your name on it. The FMLA logs, pulled directly from Meridian's own system 3 weeks ago. I paused. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, Derek. I was going to handle this quietly, as a family. But Grant told me, standing by the grill an hour ago, that he's planning to promote you next quarter. I couldn't let that happen without him having the full picture first. That wasn't cruelty. That was fairness, to him and to every employee at Meridian who's ever told the truth on a timesheet. Grant Holloway's phone rang at that exact moment. I want to be clear, I didn't plan that part. Some things just land the way they're going to land. He glanced at the screen, said, "Excuse me, it's my office," and stepped toward the edge of the porch, phone pressed to his ear, voice dropping low, but not so low that the whole yard, in that particular silence, didn't understand exactly what kind of call it was. Derek stood frozen by the grill, Watching his boss take a work call at his father's dinner party less than 90 seconds after learning his family had committed benefits fraud on Meridian's dime. Diane had both hands pressed to her mouth now. Lauren wasn't crying. Lauren was watching her brother with an expression I can only describe as a lifetime of small disappointments finally arriving at their sum total. Grant came back to the table maybe 4 minutes later, his face composed like a man who'd already decided how the rest of the conversation would go. "Derek," he said, voice stripped of the warmth it carried an hour earlier. "I need you in HR Monday morning, first thing. I've already asked compliance to pull the full FMLA file this weekend. Given what I just heard, and what your father's documentation shows, I don't have a choice here. Fraudulent FMLA claims aren't a performance issue, they're a legal one, and I'm required to report it the moment I have credible knowledge of it. As of right now, I do." "Grant," Derek said, his voice cracking in a way I hadn't heard since he was a boy. "Come on, that's my dad exaggerating. He's still recovering, he's not." "I'm not exaggerating anything," I said, and I kept my voice level, the way I'd kept it through every single line of that toast. "I have the boat purchase agreement, Derek. I have the bank transfers. I have the visitor logs from Sunny Acres with your name in the sign-in book exactly 6 times in 11 weeks. This isn't a story I'm telling. This is a stack of paper." Cheryl Holloway had quietly gathered her purse. Grant looked at Derek one more time, not unkindly, but with the flat finality of a man whose own name was now attached to a decision he had to make regardless of how the dinner had started. "I'll see you Monday," he said, and he and Cheryl walked to their car without another word, the porch lights catching the banner overhead. "Welcome home, Dad," swaying slightly in the evening breeze like it hadn't noticed anything had changed. Derek stood in the backyard for a long moment after the Holloway's car pulled away, and something in him seemed to be searching for an angle, the way a man checks his pockets for keys he already knows aren't there. "You could have told me privately," he finally said. "You could have handled this like a family." "I did try to handle it like a family," I said. 41 days ago, a family would have asked me what I wanted before they decided where to put me. A family would have visited more than 6 times in 11 weeks. A family wouldn't have used my joint account with your mother to buy a boat while I couldn't hold a fork." I looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not the one who stopped acting like family first, Derek. I just noticed later than I should have." Diane hadn't said a word this entire time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was very quiet, and it was aimed entirely at our son. "The account," she said. "Our joint account. You told me you were handling the Sunny Acres bill, so I wouldn't have to worry about it. You told me that." She looked at him like she was seeing a stranger standing in her son's golf shirt. $26,000, Derek. For a boat. "I was going to pay it back," Derek said, and even he seemed to hear how thin that sounded the moment it left his mouth. Nobody responded to that. There wasn't anything left to say to it. Lauren walked over and put her hand on my arm, not to comfort me exactly, more like she needed something steady to hold on to herself. "Dad," she said quietly, "I had no idea about any of this. I mean, I knew Sunny Acres was bad. I didn't know about the rest." "I know, sweetheart," I said. "That's exactly why you're not the one standing where he's standing right now." Derek left a little after 9, alone, his boat parked at a lake he wasn't sure, come Monday morning, he'd still be able to afford to keep. Nobody walked him to his car. "Here's what happened in the weeks that followed, because I want you to have the whole ending, not just the moment at the table." Meridian's investigation confirmed everything Elliot had documented, and Derek was terminated for cause 11 days later, no severance, a personnel file that would follow him to any future employer who called for a reference. HR also flagged the FMLA fraud to the State Labor Board, standard procedure for a claim that size, and Derek spent a good part of that summer meeting with his own attorney instead of mine. I didn't press criminal charges over the boat money, though it would have been within my rights. Instead, I had Elliot draft a repayment agreement, $26,000 plus the rehab cost difference, paid monthly directly to Diane, not to me, over the next 6 years. Derek signed it. He didn't have much choice, given what not signing it would have opened him up to. I rewrote my will that August. It wasn't dramatic, and I want to correct the record on that, because some people hear a story like this and assume someone gets cut off entirely, written out in a blaze of fury. That's not what I did. Derek is still my son. He still receives a share, though it's now held in a trust with staged distributions, structured so no single account of his can absorb that kind of number again without oversight. Lauren's share increased, and I paid off her Civic outright and put a down payment toward a house near Mission Hospital in her name alone. The week after the dinner, because a woman who shows up quietly with applesauce and a box fan for 11 straight weeks deserves a door that's entirely her own. Sunny Acres received a formal complaint from Elliot's office over the sanitation and staffing issues I documented, cross-referenced with 3 similar complaints filed the same year. I don't know exactly what came of it beyond a state inspection, but Priya still works there, and she got a proper thank you from me, because kindness under bad conditions is its own kind of currency, and I intend to keep paying it forward. Diane and I are still married. This isn't a story about a marriage falling apart. It's a story about a mother finally seeing her son clearly and having to sit with what that costs. She still makes the peach cobbler. She still keeps the books, mostly out of habit now. But she doesn't manage any account alone anymore, not even the small ones, and I think some part of her is relieved by that, the way you're relieved to set down something heavy you didn't realize you'd been carrying. I think about that hallway at Sunny Acres sometimes, the one outside my door where Derek stood making calls he thought I couldn't understand. So much of what people really believe about you comes out in the moments they think you can't hear them. My son believed I was a careful man who'd rather rot in a cheap facility than see money spent freely on his behalf. He built 11 weeks of decisions on that belief, and never once thought to check if it was true by simply asking me. I'm 67 years old. I've got a cane in the front closet I mostly use on rainy days now. I've got a business still standing, a wife who finally sees clearly, and a daughter who never needed a folder of evidence to prove where she stood. Every October, the maple tree on Marymount Avenue still turns orange right on schedule, and I sit under it most evenings with a coffee, thinking about how close I came to spending the rest of my life letting people believe I couldn't hear them. I heard every word, all of it, and in the end, that turned out to be the only thing that saved me. If you made it this far, thank you for sitting with this one. If it moved you even a little, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from tonight. I'll see you in the next story.